Hello, selamat petang. I'm trying to record this lecture, lecture number 2, as I have a meeting to attend tomorrow morning. So I'm trying to record as much as I can today, and then you can access the recorded lecture whenever you want to. Yeah. Okay. The topic for today is on the characteristics and diversity among the developing countries. Yeah, so that will be the topic that we discuss on lecture 2. Excuse me. Okay, so let me start by sharing the slide that I have prepared. Okay. All right, so the diverse structures and common characteristics of developing countries. Now, there are a lot of countries which are grouped under the name ataupun known as the developing countries. Okay, you'll see later on. How many of these countries are grouped under developing countries or less developed countries. Now, the terminology, first of all, developing countries ataupun dalam bahasa Melayunya, bahasa Malaysia adalah negara membangun. Ya. The term itself indicates that it is fluid, dynamic, ya, sentiasa berubah, and which is not static. Ya. So also another meaning attached to developing countries is it is more optimistic and also connotes progress. In other words, it's still progressing, right, towards developed nation. One day, we don't know. Okay, then the other term which is quite similar and often used also is the term underdeveloped countries. Okay, now this is more ideological compared to the other one, and this is used mostly by dependency theories. Those people who come up with a theory regarding the dependency state of the developing countries. And to emphasize that underdevelopment is not an original condition, but rather has been created. Okay, so that is the gist of the dependency theory. Okay, so developing countries and underdeveloped countries are used synonymously. Okay, these are the map showing the different regions of the world classified under developed, developing, and also less developed countries. Okay, so so most of the developing countries are in the south, yeah, African continent, South American continent, and biggest part is also in Asian region as well. Yeah. Okay. So the blue, dark blue ones are the developed countries or the advanced economies, they call it. Okay. So in terms of the classification of the world, first of all, there is also the term, and I will often use this term as well in the lecture, which is third world. It also refers to the developing countries as well. Now, this third world term reflects the Cold War origins, yeah, whereby as the first world was developed refers to referring to the developed capitalist countries. The second world was a Soviet bloc or Soviet Union, and the rest, yeah, the rest of the countries are known as the third world. Okay. Then also another term, or rather the classification of the world according to north or south. the north and south here is with the idea being most developed countries were located in the north, so happen to be that way. Yeah, most of the developed countries, if you look back at the map just now, you can find that most of the developed countries, including Canada, US, Europe, European countries, and also Japan, except for Australia and New Zealand, which is in the south. Yeah, so the developed countries in the north, and so they are often referred to as the north, and the developing countries are mostly in the south. So that's how the term north-south region of the world came about. And then another term also which is often referred to the developing countries is known as the emerging market economies. Emerging market economies versus mature market economies, which is in the developed countries. And the term emerging means that it is going to be, or the market, yeah, the new market in the world. While as the former Soviet bloc or Soviet Union is known as the transitional economies, right? Okay, so so you should be familiar with this term. Then the third world or developing countries. In total, there are 160 member countries of the United Nations or UN, which can be classified as the third world or developing countries ataupun negara membangun. Now, basically, these are the countries. These are relatively poor countries. Kalau dibandingkan negara-negara yang sudah maju, with so many diverse culture, diverse economic, social, and also political structures. Ya, sangat-sangat berbeza, pada same time juga mempunyai persamaan. Okay, so this is based on the distribution based on people living below national poverty line. Jadi kalau kita lihat di sini jelas bahwa kebanyakan negara yang who live below poverty lines are those in South America, and particularly in Africa, and also some parts of Asia, but India, and so on. Yeah. Right. Defining the developed world. First of all, the United Nations classification system, the UN classification system, classified nations of the world into three categories. The first one is the less developed countries, ataupun LDC. The second one is the developed countries, or DC, and comprising also of non-oil exporting countries. Yeah, altogether 19 countries. Then the third group is the group of nations. Ya, adalah negara OPEC, ya, the oil exporting countries, 13 countries altogether. Okay, that's how United Nations classification system is. The World Bank too has its own classification. This is classification based in the year 2000. There are 208 countries in the world with each population of 30,000 or more. Ya, yang mana negara yang kecil daripada 30,000 populasi itu tidak masuk dalam sini lah. Are classified and ranked according to their gross national income per capita. Gross national income per capita. Okay, so the low income countries are those with less than or equals to or less than $755 per year, right? Per capita. Right? The lower middle income middle income-nya dibagi kepada dua. The first one is the lower middle income, income between 756 to 2,995 US dollar per person. The upper middle income pula adalah those who are earning or having income between 2,996 to 9,265. So quite a big group here, yeah? Upper middle income group. Okay, and then the high income group are those countries whose income, gross national income per capita is 9,266 or more. Yeah, so this consists of the 19 developed countries plus 5 other developing countries. And by the way, some of these countries here, this is in the year 2000, right now has been classified as developed countries. Yeah, by if you look at the based on gross national income per capita, for example, Singapore, Hong Kong, yeah, and so on. Okay, so this is also the map showing where the high income countries, low income countries, and so on. Yeah. All right. So you can look at that later on by yourself and study the distribution. And then the World Bank also. The World Bank comes up with its own classification to classify countries into developed and developing countries. So using the per capita income, as mentioned just now. Okay, so low income and lower and middle income are classified under developing countries, while as the upper middle income and high income, are classified as the developed countries. Okay. All right. So these are, for example, the countries, in the world, and the classification by region and income in 2003. This is an old figure, but I just want to share with you the distribution, throughout the world. UMC is upper middle income. LIC is low income countries. LMC stand for lower middle income countries. Yeah. Okay, and then do we have example of high income here? Perhaps not. Yeah, not in this region. Okay, and just to continue, this you can find in textbooks actually. Low income countries. This example. Some of these countries are mostly in Africa and also Asia region. The middle income countries. I think Malaysia is not listed, but I think it's grouped under the middle income countries. Yeah, it's not listed here. Okay, so those are the countries classified as middle income. And then there is a term called newly industrializing countries, based on the rate of industrialization in the countries. Yeah? And these countries include Singapore, Korea, Spain, Taiwan, and so on. Yeah, which is known as newly industrializing then. But I think we can call them industrialized countries. Yeah, South Korea particularly. Yeah, one of the countries with high income and also high rate of industrialization. All right. Then you have the OPEC, and these are the OPEC countries, our producing organization of petroleum exporting countries, ya, termasuk negara Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and so on, Iran, Iraq. These are oil producing countries. Okay, what am I trying to show here? This GDP or PPP in 2019. This is the quite latest lah, you can consider that. Kalau tadi 2003 punya figure, this is 2019. So you can see newcomer here, China as a high income countries, yeah. Sama dengan US, yeah. So China now is very rich. Dari segi economy, it's second to the United States, right? Okay. All right. Per capita GDP, GDP is gross domestic product ataupun keluaran negara kasar, KNK. So per capita GDP is a measure of the total output of country that takes gross domestic product and divided by the number of people in the country. So that is the per capita GDP. Excuse me, let me take a break for a minute. I have to answer a call. Yeah, I have to take a break. Yeah, it's a call first. Yeah, sorry, there's an interruption today. So let me reload again. Yeah, screen. Okay. All right. So so this is also another map showing the distribution in terms of income per capita, right? Tapi based on PPP, in other words, purchasing power parity, yeah? Purchasing power parity. How much the value of money or goods that you can get, yeah, using certain currency, for example, right? So it has, in other words, this has been standardized, yeah. So you see that rich countries, US and Australia, European countries, these are countries with high GDP per capita. Okay, yang kurangnya adalah di negara Afrika. Okay, the United Nations Development Program or UNDP juga mempunyai klasifikasi sendiri. So the United Nations Development Program or UNDP classified countries or ranking countries according to their level of human development. So it's different from the previous classification. This one is based on human development index. Yeah. Now, from their classification, about 53 countries, which include a few developing countries as well, are considered as high on Human Development Index. And 65 countries are considered as middle in terms of the Human Development Index, and 55 other countries have low HDI ataupun Human Development Index. Right, so this is another classification. The Human Development Index emphasize the outcomes for people and their capabilities, yeah, and should be the ultimate criteria for assessing the progress of a country, not just the economic growth alone, right? So, so it accounts for average achievements, and number one, life expectancy. Life expectancy is more or less a proxy for leading a long and healthy life. So if you have a long life, meaning that you are healthy, yeah. People living in the countries are healthy, yeah, sehat. And then the second item is education, yeah. Which is the proxy for being knowledgeable, yeah, and then the third one is income per capita, which is a proxy for command of resources to have a decent standard of living. So all this are taken into account, yeah, to come out with the index, you know, Human Development Index study. Okay, so that's another diagram here. longevity or life expectancy at birth. This is the index of population health and longevity. Knowledge study ataupun education is measured in terms of number of years of schooling ataupun expected years of schooling. And then the standard of living, which is determined by the income. This is the natural logarithm of gross domestic product per capita at purchasing power parity. So these three combined, tapi weightage tak sama, ya. So weightage tak sama, but it is consistent use, ya, to measure HDI ataupun Human Development Index across countries. Oke, jadi kalau kita lihat kepada ini negara yang mempunyai high HDI, Canada, US, and then Australia, New Zealand, and many countries in Europe, plus Japan as well. Right. So on the other end, you have the low Human Development Index mostly in Africa, right? Africa. Okay. All right. This table also shows you the Human Development Index for 20 selected countries, but this is in old data based in 1995. I just want to share with you how secara relative, how different countries have different HDI. Okay, so Malaysia is among those countries having a high Human Development Index, right? Okay, so despite the various classification system, the third world countries do share some common goals. Yeah? They share some common goals ataupun alamat yang sama. Number one, the goal is to reduce poverty, reduce inequality, and reduce unemployment. Yeah, so every one of these countries is trying to achieve this goal. The second goal, which are shared among the developing countries, is one that is to provide minimum level of education, health, housing, and food to every citizen. Yeah. The third goal is to broaden the economic and social opportunities. In other words, widen the opportunities in terms of economics, in terms of social opportunities as well. And the fourth one is to forge a cohesive nation state, ya, negara yang aman, ya, no war, for example, right? So a cohesive nation state, ya, negara yang apa namanya ini stable nation, right? Okay, so these are the four common goals, of developing or the third world countries ataupun developing countries. And then next, we go into the diversity among the developing countries, ya, ataupun kepelbagaian, or if you will, differences lah, ya, and diversities in the developing countries. So some of these diversities can be seen in terms of the size of the country. Secondly, whether or not the country has been, in terms of been ruled by colonies, yeah, colonial background. And the third one is the endowment of physical and human resources. Berapa banyak sumber-sumber yang ada, sumber physical and also human, ya, ataupun manusia. Keempatnya, the fourth one is ethnic and religious composition. Also differs between a lot of diversities between countries, and then the relative importance of public and private sectors as well. In other words, diversity among countries in terms of the importance of both public and private sectors, and also industrial structure. Diversity in terms of industrial structure. Some have a high rate of industrialization, some have low. The other diversity can be seen in terms of dependence on external economic political forces, in other words, dependence on other countries, yeah, other forces. And the third one is the diversity in terms of institutional and also political structure, ya, perbezaan yang terdapat. Okay, so let's look closely at the first one, the size of the country and income level. The physical size of the country, its population size and income per capita are critically important for economic development. Right? So of the 160 member countries of the United Nations in the year 2000, for example, 87 countries had fewer than 5 million people, right? Sikit. And 58 had fewer than 2.5 million people. 38 countries had fewer than 500,000 people. Right? So a lot of diversification in terms of the size of the country. Okay, this is just some data to share with you. For example, this is 2007 lah. Sekarang ni mungkin dah berubah ya. China, the biggest country in terms of population size. About 20% of the world populations are living in China. Then second is India. India, according to some demographers, they predicted that India will overtake China soon in terms of the population size. Okay, so these are examples of countries with high population. All right. So you could see the structural diversity of developing economies in terms of population and income. So most populous is China. But if you look at GNP per capita, it has it is not big. Yeah? Only US 840 USD per person. Sebabnya apa? Sebabnya bilangan penduduk yang terlampau ramai. So even though you know the economy is big, but when you divide by the total number of person living in China, therefore the average per person is quite low. Kalau dibandingkan dengan Japan, dengan US, ya, ini walaupun ekonomi ataupun ekonominya tak apa, kalau dibandingkan dengan China, ya, US lebih lah, tapi in terms of per capita dia sangat-sangat besar, sama juga Jepun. And the least populous country, di negara yang paling kecil, ini only, for example, Saint Kitts Nevis, ya, yang hanya mempunyai apa nama ni, few people, right? But the GNP per capita is quite big. Yeah. All right. Now this is not 41 million. Sorry. I think this is probably about thousands, not million, over here. I'll check on that later. But it's one of the smallest countries. Yeah? Okay, if you want to know more about the countries and GDP per capita, you can click on this link, yeah, and look for yourself. So I will not go there. Yeah. All right. Jadi negara yang besar, big countries, has a lot of advantages as well as disadvantages. The advantages of a large countries, both in terms of physical size of the country and also the population, are number one, there is going to be a lot of diverse resource endowment. Ya, telah banyak sumber-sumber apa nama ni asli dan sebagainya, ya, termasuk sumber manusia. So that is an advantage. So large, because the number of people are big or huge, therefore this has a large potential market for locally produced goods. So that's, for example, India and China, because the number of people are so large that they can sell the product, ya, locally produced good, boleh dijual, ya, di dalam negara. So that makes up the market for the locally produced good. The third one is big countries have less or lesser dependency on foreign resources and products. Yeah, less compared to smaller countries. Nevertheless, there are disadvantages, one of which is problem of administration if the country is too big. Yeah? So, for example, one good example is Indonesia, big country and also quite diverse, so many islands and so on. So there is a problem with administration. Sama juga negara lain lah, seperti China pun sama juga. Ya. How to administer a very big country. Russia too. Yeah. Then you have the second disadvantage, sorry, is regional imbalances. So some part of the country is rich, some part are poor. For example, the eastern part of China, eastern coast and so on, these are rich regions, yeah, of China. But as you go inland towards the western part of China, central and western part of China, there you can see, where the income level is low, yeah, where poverty could still be found in China. Okay, itu kedua. Sama juga dengan kalau kita lihat di Indonesia, di Java Island, for example, these are better compared to many other islands, yeah, in Indonesia. Termasuk juga lah Kalimantan, Indonesia. And then the third disadvantage is post-national cohesion, to dari segi unity, ya, in the country will be affected. Yeah? If you have a big country, have too many people, yeah? So that will affect national cohesion. All right. Yang keduanya, this is with regard to the historical and colonial background. Yeah, most of the developing countries were formerly colonies of Western nations. Ini masuk negara di Afrika, masuk negara di Asia, masuk juga negara in some parts, in other parts of the world as well. Yeah, so most of the developing countries were formerly colonies of Western nations, and most of the economic structures, termasuk system of education and social institutions, were also modeled on those of their former colonial rulers. Contohnya Malaysia, kita mencontohi the British system of education. Kalau di Indonesia, very much following the Dutch system of education. Okay, so di negara-negara di Afrika kebanyakannya model after the French model of system of education. Right. Nevertheless, there are three most important ideas or values that had impacted the third world countries as a result of colonization. Adalah yang pertama adalah, the first one is the private property. Kalau sebelumnya colonization, tidak ada such thing private property. Yeah, so now you have your private property, private land, private houses, and so on and so forth. Yeah. The second legacy of colonization adalah personal taxation. Yeah, cukai persendirian, and that comes with the colonization. Okay. The third one is the requirement that tax be paid in money rather than kind. Kalau dahulunya, remember in Sarawak, in the old days before the colony comes in, tax were paid in kinds. Contohnya by paying gunakan padi ataupun beras sebagai contoh, ya, to pay tax. But with the colony, yeah, the tax cannot be paid in terms of kind, but must be paid in terms of money, yeah, rather than kind. Okay. All right. The third diversity is in terms of physical and human resources. Okay, we've seen just now in terms of the size of the population, the physical and human resources, refers to the total number of people and also the skills of the people as well. Ini juga termasuk tanah, land, natural resources and other raw materials that you can find in the country. So all these endowments are important for development. For example, land is important for development. Natural resources such as oil, yeah, is important for development. We can see it in the Middle East countries. Yeah, without oil, many of these Middle East countries would still be poor. Yeah, but because of oil, for example, Qatar, all of a sudden become one of the richest countries in the world. Right? China, India, Indonesia. One of the good thing about these countries, they have so many people. In other words, they have plenty of human resource in those countries. So that is in terms of the physical resources ataupun human resources. Right. So some countries have little, some countries have a lot. Yeah. So a lot of diversity in terms of the physical and human resources. And then also in terms of ethnicity and religious composition, ethnic and religious composition, many of these countries are heterogeneous in the sense that they have diverse ethnic and religious composition, which usually experience internal conflicts, and that's the danger ataupun satu masalah lah. Where there is a lot of heterogeneity ataupun heterogeneous countries, a lot of differences. Homogeneous countries or nation, for example, have less conflict, yeah, more stable. Contohnya Hong Kong, mostly Chinese, Korea, Singapore, majority Chinese, and Taiwan. So they have less conflict kalau dibandingkan dengan countries which have a lot of or numerous ethnic group or religious group. Right. So most internal conflicts in the world today are or occur in developing countries. Okay, banyak di Africa and also other parts of the world as well. Right. The fifth one is the relative importance of public and private sectors. So most of the developing countries have mixed economic system. In other words, they have both the public and private ownership and also the use of resources. Right. So both public and private sector participation. So countries with bigger private sectors participation or involvement and also ownership tends to develop faster compared to another country with little or no private sector participation ataupun ownership. Yeah. So most private sectors in the developing countries are owned by foreign investors, unfortunately, because the private sector needs a lot of capital, and most developing countries just do not have the capital to start, businesses, private sector. Okay, right. The sixth one is the industrial structure. In other words, struktur industri, ya, di negara berkenaan, di negara yang sedang bangun, majority of developing countries are agriculture ataupun agrarian, ya, in economic, as social as well as cultural outlook. In other words, the culture, the social and economic are very much tied to agriculture, right? So agriculture has been a way of life for majority of the people in Asia, Africa, and also Latin America, right? So industrial ataupun manufacturing sectors has largely remained secondary in many of these, or in most of these countries. Countries in South America, which had long history of independence, for example, they tend to possess more advanced industrial sectors than countries of Africa and South Asia, right? Okay, so some countries are still very much dependent on agriculture for its economy, and some countries also are a little bit more advanced in terms of manufacturing sectors. Jadi terdapat apa namanya diversity ataupun perbezaan. So accelerated growth of manufacturing sectors, contohnya in South Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan. We started in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. So these are the newly industrialized countries. India, on the other hand, used to have the largest manufacturing sectors in the developing world, but still it can be considered as relatively small, considering the size or the enormous size of its rural population. Sebab apa? Sebab kebanyakan penduduknya masih lagi tinggal di kawasan luar bandar di India. Yeah, it does have a big manufacturing sectors, one of the biggest among the developing world. China, this is it's a dia punya manufacturing sector lately has overtaken India, and as I mentioned earlier on, China is now second to US lah dari segi size the economy. So if you just name anything, if you are buying product online, chances are 90% of the time they are made in China. Ya, produk yang kita beli melalui online purchase. Yeah. Okay. So this is just to show you the industrial structure in 17 developing countries, United States and the United Kingdom. Ya, jadi this is US and United Kingdom kalau dibandingkan dengan negara yang lain. So percentage of labor force in the agriculture sector is still very, very high among the developing countries. Yeah? And while as in terms of industry, it's relatively low. Yeah. So right. So in terms of GDP too, yeah. In terms of GDP, the industries, yeah, contribute a lot. Okay. So yeah, you can study this table and see the difference between developed and developing countries in terms of the participation of its citizen in agriculture and also in industry. Now, where are the rest? The rest are in service sector, ya, bukan dalam industri, bukan dalam pertanian, but they are in the service sector, which is not included here in this table. Okay, the seventh item is on the external dependence, ya, yaitu kebergantungan kepada pihak luar, ya, in terms of economic, politics, and also culture. So the degree of dependence is related to the size, resource endowment, and also political history. So that it does have, ya. So negara yang pernah dijajah dulu tends to become dependent on the colonizer. Yeah. So substantial dependence for most developing nations on the developed nations. Yeah. So the form of dependency include foreign investment and trade with the developed countries. In other words, dependent on the developed countries for foreign direct investment and also trading with the developed nation as well. Another form of dependency is the importation of foreign technologies. Yeah, in other words, technologies, machineries, and so on are supplied ataupun diperolehi dari negara-negara yang telah membangun. Yeah. So importation of foreign technologies, and also other form of dependency include education, governance, values, pattern of consumption juga, yeah, and also attitudes toward life. So those are other form of dependency from the developing countries upon developed countries. The eighth one is the political structure. In other words, diversity in terms of political structure, power, and also interest group yang ada di negara-negara yang sedang membangun. So the political power structure, as well as the vested interest of ruling elites, komponennya kecil tapi powerful nih, determine the strategies and effectiveness of economic and social change, ataupun social development in the country. So it is the few people who have the power. So most developing countries are ruled directly or indirectly by small and powerful elites. Okay. Jadi mereka ni akan menentukan the economy, the future of the country, right? So tapi kadang-kadang this powerful elites ini, menyalahgunakan kuasa, and therefore all kinds of corruption and all that berlaku di negara tersebut, and that's quite common in developing countries. Corruption, abuse of power, and so on by those who rule. Okay, so structural diversity in developing economies. Some of the important observations. There's no necessary relation among a country's size, per capita income, and the degree of equality ataupun inequality. Tidak terdapat hubungan. So colonialism exposed countries in Africa and also in Asia to new forms of potential exploitation, and have resulted in different institutional and social patterns as well. So with the exception of the Persian Gulf oil states in the Middle East, most developing countries have minimal endowments of raw materials and minerals. This is just an extra info or note on the diversity in terms of structure of the developing economies. Okay. And also from important observation, ethnic and religious conflicts have become frequent post-Cold War. Indigenous population continue to be discriminated against in Latin American countries, with the exceptions of Malaysia and Mauritius. So most developing countries have mixed economic system, to agriculture industry, and it depends on the country. Some have bigger chunk of agriculture and less on industry. Some countries are more advanced in industry and less on agriculture. But what is important is that they still maintain the mixed economy in some of these countries. Majority of the developing countries are agrarian, and agriculture is a way of life for the people. And the degree of corruption, just mentioned about this just now, differs widely across the countries. Some countries have high rate of corruption, some countries have less. And the various interests and power groups among different segments of the population in a developing country is the result of the economic, social, and political history. Jadi sejarah banyak menentukan ya, the power, ya, interest group yang ada di negara tersebut. Okay, right. So those are the diversities, yeah, of the characteristics. I'm sorry, the diversities among developing countries. So the next topic is on the common characteristics of developing nations. Right. All right. So maybe I spend maybe around half an hour on this, yeah, quickly. So the common characteristic of developing nations, number one, a low level of productivity. Productivity here means how much you can produce, yeah, in a day or in an hour and so on, in terms of value, yeah, of the work, ya, nilai hasil kerja tadi. Keduanya, imperfect world markets in developing countries. There is also colonial dominance and dependence, yeah, among the developing countries. Some countries have over-dependence on agriculture, many of these countries, and also high levels of unemployment is also another characteristics, di mana kadar unemployment itu sangat tinggi. Some countries too still have high levels of population growth, yeah, particularly in African countries, termasuk juga negara-negara di Asia, tetapi dibandingkan dengan Afrika, I think Asian countries have slightly lower levels of population growth, and of course, low living standard. Okay, so we will look at this briefly. Yeah. All right. Number one, low levels of living, low living standard lah. Yeah. So low incomes, inequality, poor health, and inadequate education and housing, high infant mortality, low life and work expectancies. So these are one of the characteristics of developing countries. Yeah, low income, inequality tinggi, tahap kesehatan rendah, level education ataupun inadequate education, ada yang tak sempat ataupun tidak memiliki peluang untuk pergi sekolah, poor housing and so on. Yeah, these are some of them. Then related to that is the low levels of productivity. Jadi if you have low levels of productivity, therefore the amount of effort you put in will only produce very little, in terms of dollars and cents lah. So labor productivity is generally low, and labor productivity is also very much related to the conditions of the low level of living that we have, that I mentioned earlier on. Yeah. Okay, now kalau banding lah, ini gunakan traditional methods, dibandingkan dengan negara yang sudah maju menggunakan machineries, ya, teknologi sebagainya, so they can produce more, right? From 1 hour, 1 day's work and so on. Okay, so this one is on the per capita gross national product in selected countries. Has to do with productivity as well, ya. Jadi ini per capita gross national product, per capita GNP, kita boleh lihat di sini Switzerland is one of the highest, if not the highest, in the world in terms of GNP, per capita gross national product. Yeah, more than 44,000 per year per capita, followed by Japan, US, Kingdom, and of course China is going up lah, yeah. This is in 1997. I'm quite sure they are somewhere around, has gone up, yeah, right now. So countries with the highest per capita GDP in 2015, Luxembourg. It's a small country. Luxembourg is a small country, but it has in terms of per capita income, is the highest, yeah. Almost 100,000 per person per year. Right. So this is just the distribution in terms of the per capita GDP of different countries. So Singapore is up there, yeah, among the top 10, yeah, 53,000. Kita in Malaysia, I think we are more or less around 29,000 per capita GNP per year. Yeah. Okay, right. So income in comparison of GNP per capita. This is just another table to show the difference between developed and developing countries. Okay. Again, even you convert into PPP, also still low. Okay. Also another one, you can see that on your own, you have the slides that I want for you to see. Yeah, the different GNP per capita. Yeah, Malaysia. Here we are, and this is 1997. We have gone up. Yeah. Did I say 29? Sorry, about 9,000 per US dollars per capita. Sorry. Another one also to show you. But this one is the growth rates of real gross national product per capita. Ya, pertumbuhan lah ya, dari gross national product per capita in terms of percentage of annual growth rate. Right. Jadi some countries have improved, some countries have not. Yeah, some actually have gone down. For example, Brazil. Yeah, between 1980 to 1994. Right. Right. So the third one is the third characteristics of the developing countries is that there is a high rate of population growth and dependency burdens. Okay. More than 5/6, yeah, of the world's 7.4 billion people live in developing countries. In other words, more than 80%, yeah, of the people live in the world live in developing countries with a relatively high birth rate and also death rates di kalangan negara-negara tersebut. Thus, the population growth rates in developing nation is about 1.6% per year compared to 0.7% for developed nation. Jadi masih tinggi ya, 1.6% per year bagi negara yang sedang membangun. And 40% of the population in less developed countries are children who are aged 15 years and below. So these are the people who are considered as dependents because they are not working, they're not earning, right? So 40% is very high. Right? In other words, and also the other dependents is the group yang 65 tahun ke atas, 65 years and above. So if you have a very high percentage of children and also old age, maka the dependency burden is high, yeah, for those countries. So close to 90% of dependents in less developed countries are children. That's different, yeah. Dependents in less developed countries are mostly children compared to only 60% for the developed countries. Jadi that's different, yeah. Developed countries have less children as dependent dibandingkan dengan negara yang sedang membangun. So the overall dependency burden, young and old combined, for developing nation is about 45% compared to only about 30% for developing nation. Jadi isunya adalah if you high rate of dependency, but your GDP per capita is small, maka ianya membebankan, ya, it's going to be a burden to the family, to the country as well, yeah, because those who are in the working age group, we have to provide for the those who are dependents. Okay, right. Number 4, substantial dependence on agriculture and primary product. Jadi kebanyakan negara yang sedang membangun masih bergantung kepada pertanian ataupun primary products untuk diekspor. Okay, so most of the population of developing nations live in the rural areas. and more than 60% are involved in agriculture compared to only 7%. Kalau dibandingkan negara sudah membangun or developed countries, only 7% of the people on average are involved in agriculture in developed countries. And another predominant thing about agriculture in the less developed countries, they are small scale, small scale agriculture. And less developed countries are also dependent on primary products, primary export, yaitu agriculture products, oil, timber, and other natural resources and raw materials. These are the primary export of the developing countries. Bukan manufactured goods. Developed countries, they export manufactured goods. Developing countries, they export primary products. Number 5, the prevalence of imperfect markets and incomplete information. Ini satu hal kan. So many of these countries just do not have a system that works well. Most developing countries either do not have or have extremely weak legal and also institutional foundations to compete in the free market economies. Okay, so among those are legal system for contracts, either is not there or weak. They do not have stable and trustworthy currency. Some of the currencies are very, very unstable. That fluctuates in terms of values. And infrastructure also still poor roads and utilities in the countries, electricity, water supply, jalan raya, railways and so on, including ports as well. So, and banking and insurance as well, masih berkurangan. The credit markets also still very, very poor in some of these countries. So market information for consumers and producers in terms of the price, quantities, the qualities of products, many of these are not available. Jadi that affects the farmers who produce the agriculture products, because they do not have access to the market information. And also credit borrowing system also sometimes difficult to assess or lack of it. Okay, so these are the berkaitan dengan imperfect markets and incomplete information for a country to compete in the free market economies. Yang keenam, dominance and dependence and vulnerability in international relations. This is, in other words, one of which is that the third world countries or the developing countries, they are dependent on big nations or rich nations. So unequal distribution of economic and political power between the rich and poor nations. And this is usually expressed in terms of dominant power of rich nations to control the patterns of international trade, and also ability to transfer technology, foreign aid, and capital to the developing countries. So this is controlled by the rich nation. So this have caused the economy of the developing nations to be influenced by foreign power, influenced by foreign power, and not by forces within the country itself. Jadi banyak bergantung kepada pihak luar, dan bukan bergantung kepada elemen dalaman. So the rich countries gets richer at the expense of the poor. And this is particularly true in the context of international trade between developed countries and developing countries. Okay, so to conclude, the problems of developing countries have both global as well as domestic origins. I mean, when we talk about global, we talk about the dependencies, the power from foreign countries, and domestic origins could be the lack of resources dan sebagainya, yeah? Lack of education and so on. Yeah? The economic and social forces, both internal as well as external, are responsible for the poverty, inequality, and also low productivity in most developing countries. Right? So that explains how or why rather developing countries remain low in its productivity and high in poverty and inequality. Okay, so the pursuit of economic and social development, therefore, requires the formulation of appropriate strategies within the developing world, as well as changing the international economic power. So there is a need to change the power structure, yeah, in economic, international economic order, and particularly planning strategies within the developing world, and not so much dependence on the developed nations, right? So mempunyai acuan sendiri, more or less, yeah. So for developing a nation to progress, yeah, in terms of its economy. Okay, so that's the end of the lecture 2. I will upload the notes on the PowerPoint, which I prepared on ELIP as well for you to refer to. And this lecture also, as I said, I will upload on ELIP, yeah, through YouTube, so that you can look at it, listen to the lecture in later days. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I have to do this, because otherwise we'll miss our lecture for this week. Yeah. So once again, thank you very much. I'll see you again the following week. Okay. All right. So bye-bye. Thank you very much.